here at North Shore Congregation Israel, another reason why Shabbat Shuva is noteworthy is because of the tradition that we have of inviting a different congregant or congregants to speak each and every year, reflecting on the theme of the High Holy Days of Uvacharta v'chayim. What does it mean to do as the Yom Kippur Torah portion asks of us to choose blessing, to choose life? And what does it mean to live a life guided by that choice, that principle? Over the years, if you have been here on Shabbat Shuva, you have no doubt been inspired by any number of the folks that we've had speak, share their lives' stories, and really make a difference in two cases that I can think of, actually saving lives as a result of the words that were spoken on a given Shabbat Shuva. And there's really nothing more important than that idea in our tradition. This Shabbat Shuva, we are all really, really lucky to be able to be here to hear our speaker, our congregant, Dr. Mark Rasenick. Many of you know Mark just as a normal guy who comes around Shabbat services with his wife Helene and just part of our congregation, as they have been since 1988. But Mark has a really incredible background. He sent me just 6 key points of his CV, his background, and what I would say that he didn't send to me, but in knowing what they are and seeing them, it's very easy to see that the thread that links all of the disparate parts together is no doubt his place that he takes in this world as a bridge builder through healing. Healing in ways we understand, and healing in ways we should be called upon and are called upon to understand. So I'll just give you a few highlights of this. And Mark, some of the words are very fancy and I can't pronounce them. So I'm gonna skip them, but I'm gonna give you the general gist of everything. So Mark is a distinguished professor of physiology and biophysics and psychiatry at the University of Illinois College of Medicine, in addition to any number of other titles that he holds and professional organizations of which he is a part. He is also the founder and chief scientific officer of PAX Neuroscience, a company formed to establish new standards for the diagnosis and treatment of depression. Mark has been an activist for peace and social justice since he was 18 years old. He went to Hanoi during the Vietnam War with 11 other student body presidents, seeking to make peace with the Vietnamese. Since then, he chaired the NSCI Social Action Committee. That's actually where I first met Mark 21 years ago. Served on the Commission of Social Action of Reform Judaism for the Union of Reform Judaism, and served as Health Policy Fellow on the staff of the late Senator Ted Kennedy. Mark is also an activist for biomedical research, vice president and chair-elect of the American Brain Coalition, which combines patient advocacy groups, provider organizations, and neuroscientists to advocate for those with brain disorders. Mark has so much else to share with us, some of which truly is incredible, and he is a person who acts for the sake of the betterment of humanity. And I am not being hyperbolic when I say that, and you will hear why shortly. Most importantly, I should say, though, besides being married to Helene, Mark is the father of Elliot, Matthew, and Emily, all proud NSCI alum, grown up through here and making their way in the world. We are so proud to have the Rasenick family as a part of our community and delighted to have Mark with us this evening as our speaker. Mark. You can clap, it's okay. You're tall, so I gotta.
It's a good way to get me to show up on Shabbat Shuva.
I do what I can do. Here we go, you got it.
Okay, so.
Just come up close to the mic.
Come close to the mic,
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, and Mazel Tov to the families whose sons are becoming bar mitzvot tomorrow. And when Rabbi Geffman asked me to give this sermon, I was honored and terrified. how do I incorporate all I want to say in less than 10 minutes and do it without PowerPoint? It's a daunting task. So, as Rabbi Geffen mentioned, this is Shabbat Shuva, this Shabbat of return or repentance. And our Torah portion shows Moses nearing his own death, beseeching the people of Israel to choose life, the V'charta B'chaim. Hence, my charge from the rabbis. Take the theme, choose life, create a single message, and use your own life as an example. I'm not here to talk about me. I've led an interesting life, but so have many of you here today. I do want to talk about my life as a neuroscientist relative to the theme of choose life. I spent many years studying the neurobiology of depression. This is not a trivial problem. 1 in 5 of us here either have, are, or will suffer from depression. 1 in 5. And all of us have been touched by depression in someone we love. There are treatments for depression, drugs, devices, psychotherapy, but 1/3 of those treated never achieve complete relief, and they're deemed failures, or more politely, treatment resistant. However, it doesn't appear that these patients have a different biology than those who get better, and it's not the patients who have failed. Even when antidepressants are effective, they require about 2 months to work. Worse yet, about half of those with depression will not seek treatment, and they do that because of what others think. The stigma of psychiatric illness is both real and harmful, and is an example of social injustice. That injustice is exacerbated as we have mental health parity in law, but not in fact, and insurance companies continue to restrict coverage for mental illness. Senator Kennedy once said, "It is an outrage that one with a biochemical problem in their liver is treated with compassion, while one with a biochemical problem in their brain is scorned." If I were to ask, and I'm not going to do this, but if I were to ask how many in the room are taking a drug for high blood pressure, about 1 in 7 of you would answer yes. If I were to ask how many of you were taking a drug for depression, I would guess that number would be much, much lower. But you know what? Those numbers are about the same. And that's a quantification of stigma. Compound this insult with the fact that the number of new depression therapies has slowed to a trickle, and it's not surprising that the number of completed suicides continues to wax. Somewhere in this world, a person completes suicide every 40 seconds. In the US, there are more than 3 times as many suicides as there are homicides. And if you're killed by a gun, it's twice as likely to be by yourself as it is by somebody else. Those numbers are not very uplifting, especially for a sermon built on the topic of choose life. So let's transition to the positive. Science to the rescue. Science has gotten a bad rap lately. Some people augur for the incarceration of Dr. Anthony Fauci because initially he got it wrong. Well, you know, science is all about getting it wrong. On Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Daniels spoke of the marvels of the Webb telescope. And perhaps one of the most extraordinary things about Webb was that everything worked as predicted. More often, we make a prediction, and it isn't right, or it's flat out wrong. Sometimes those wrong results lead us to really interesting new directions. And even when we think we're right, we do everything we can to prove ourselves wrong before we publish the results. Yet, sometimes, even if we do that, sometimes years later, new techniques emerge that show that we were wrong anyway. Oh, and by the way, 2 days ago, a report was published indicating that some of the Webb telescope calculations were off. So then, why do we do science? Curiosity, of course, but we also seek eternity through our discoveries. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught, eternity is not perpetual future, but perpetual presence. This is the meaning of existence, to reconcile liberty with service, to weave the threads of temporality into the fabric of eternity. Please permit me to modify that final line. To reconcile sanctity with science, so as to weave the threads of temporality into the fabric of eternity. So what about that fabric of eternity? Does that mean that those of us doing biomedical research all seek to have a disease named after us? For most, the answer is no. The depression biomarkers I'm going to talk about next have been given the moniker Mood Mark by my son Matthew. But Mark signifies marker, not Mark Rasenick. So how are my colleagues and I attempting to contribute? Earlier I mentioned the stigma of mental illness. What better way to fight stigma than with science? We have some very promising clinical data that suggest a simple biochemical hallmark or biomarker for depression. The same biomarker might also serve as an early indicator of successful treatment. If we're right, we'll know in a few days whether a drug is working, rather than having to wait 2 months. And next, we hope to develop a screen that, using a patient's own cells, will predict which drugs have the best chance of success, providing a head start for both the doctor and patient. Our discoveries may be able to help primary care doctors, who treat about 80% of depression, figure out whether what they diagnose as depression is, in fact, actually another psychiatric illness that requires a very different treatment. If we're right, we're only a year or two off from transforming the lives of 1 in 5 of us who will suffer from depression. If we're wrong, we're still a lot closer than when I started this 30 years ago. In a recent television interview, I referred to the work we have done on this depression biomarker as my mitzvah project. Some say science and religion are inherently in conflict. I have no difficulty conflating my scientific and Jewish identities. In fact, the more I learn about the complexities of biology and nature, the less I believe that this organization is totally random. Perhaps God is in every test tube, every microscope image, and every cultured cell. And God is certainly in every brain. There's more I could say, but I have no good reason to say it tonight. So thank you for listening to my story about playing a minor role in helping people to choose life and savor it as well. Gamar Hatima Tova, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. That's everything we could have wished and more. Thank you. Mark, thank you so much. I wasn't kidding when I said something, an act for the service of humanity. And it's not humanity in a sense that we shouldn't feel close to it as well. As Mark mentioned, depression affects or will affect 1 of every 5 of us. And that's what we know right now. You know, who knows really the true expansiveness of that? And as a person who has sat with, unfortunately, any number of individuals who have attempted suicide because of depression, and sat with any number of families where a person completed suicide because of depression, in this community, I can tell you that the matter is here. It does not discriminate, and also that there is hope. Something that any number of families haven't necessarily felt in the past. So if you're curious about this, if this conversation has opened questions in your mind, in your family, and this is something you want to talk about, I know that I'm always happy to talk about any of this. I know my clergy partners, Cantor Goldstein, Rabbi Daniels, Rabbi Green are, and I bet you Mark Rasenick would be welcoming of you as well. We do well, all of us, to help to destigmatize not just depression, but all mental illness that is ubiquitous in our society. It will allow all of us to take part in Mark's Mitzvah Project, all of us to save lives and to choose life in the process. So Mark, on behalf of all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, not just for being here this evening and sharing what you do, but for doing what you do. We can't wait to see where everything goes.